Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I wanted to talk about a film that I love from the early 80s. It's a slasher film. One of my favorite types of horror movies is the 80s slasher, and it's Final Exam. I even have the vinyl here, the soundtrack to Final Exam. Anyhow, Final Exam is a movie about a serial killer who targets victims at college campuses. But the reason I wanted to talk about this movie in particular is because there's a character in the movie who appears to be an inspiration for the Randy Meeks character in Scream. You probably remember Randy. He was sort of the comedic relief in the movie. He was the all-knowing on pop culture. He was the one who knew everything about 80s horror movies and who died, who didn't die. In the movie Final Exam, Radish is similar to that character, but he's more preoccupied with the violence that's happening in society at the time. Even this killer that's killed some other students at a nearby college campus, he's the one in the movie who is aware of his surroundings about what's going on. And I find this particularly interesting because a lot of slasher movies in the 80s, if you really look at them, most of the victims and the characters in the film were sort of oblivious to what's going on around them. And in this movie, Radish is a person who is sort of obsessed with crime, sort of if you think about today in our society, the ID channel, for example, which I love. Somebody who watches that kind of true crime all the time and likes to read about different serial killers. Well, that's the character of Radish in Final Exam, which is similar to Randy Meeks because he's the one who's always telling the other people in the movie about there's a serial killer. He could come to our campus. So here's a few clips of Radish, and you'll see what I'm talking about when it comes to his sort of foreshadowing of what's to come in the film.
Did you hear what happened at March College?
Hi, Radish.
Hi.
Oh, what happened at March College? Another football recruiting scandal?
No, better. A mass murderer. 2 kids were snuffed while parking at the lake.
Oh, how horrible.
I know.
Oh,
That's
you call that a
awful.
mass murderer? 2 lousy people? I call that a piker.
Well, it's a small school. You have to enter that into the equation. And it was particularly brutal. A real spectacle, at least on a local scale. Sure, it's nothing in a big city. But in a rural area, you have to take what you can get.
You two are so morbid. Oh, you're beyond that.
And to top it all off, the guy was their first-string quarterback.
And if they observe any cheating, they have been instructed to alert a highly skilled sniper that I've placed in McWilliams Tower. He was a gun bearer for the Eagle Scout down in Texas,
You mean Charles Whitman, one of my favorites.
and he's anxious to bag a few students on his own. Are there any questions?
He was a real craftsman, an excellent shot, and he played it out to the bitter end. This guy was dropping people from
I
blocks
hate to interrupt you on such a lovely note. But back to business.
As you can see from those few clips, Radish is very much in tune with the crime that's happening. Even the Whitman reference there, the UT shooter at the campus, he knows everything about it. It's one of his favorite killers, as he refers to. And it's similar, again, to the Randy Meeks character in Scream, where Randy's always regurgitating all of these, to some people, useless facts about 80s horror. Well, it appears that a lot of the stuff, obviously, that Scream was inspired by were these films from the 80s. And this is one of those direct correlations between the character of Radish and Randy. Now, there is a scene in this film that probably would not be done today in our climate, but there's a scene where a fraternity plays a joke on the campus, and they drive up in a van and they get out these masked people and start shooting students. But at that time in 1981, that obviously wasn't something that was in the news all the time. But it's interesting that that is something that is in this film. And you see the scene sort of play out, that it ends up being a big joke. But Radish is all too eager to, take this as something seriously that's happening on campus. And you see him calling the sheriff. Here's a clip of that scene.
Sheriff, this is Lanier College calling. There's been a multiple shooting on the campus quadrangle. Sir, listen! Several students have been shot and kidnapped in a brown van. You've got to get out here. It's happening. The psychopaths are here.
So as you can see, it's almost as if Radish is expecting something bad to happen. And he's constantly warning the people around him that something's going to happen, like this impending doom. And so as we get more towards the end of the film, there's a final scene where he again talks about why he thinks the way he does when it comes to violence in society, and just that he's not paranoid, but that you need to keep an eye out. Here's a look.
Drink that.
Don't you lock your door?
What could happen to me?
Famous last words.
Why are you so apprehensive? When are you going to realize that the whole world isn't made of psychopaths skulking about?
But they are out there. They do exist. People are killed every day for no reason at all. Perfect strangers wake up in the morning and decide, I think it's a good day to snuff somebody. And there are people who eat in our restaurants with us, use our highways, and vote for the president, which probably explains something about him, too.
And that's good old Radish giving us a lesson as to why we need to be aware of our surroundings, and that anybody could be a serial killer or somebody out there that's out to get you. And unfortunately, Final Exam only had one. There was no sequel. Unlike Scream, where there was a Scream 2 and Randy Meeks appeared in Scream, and coincidentally, it was on a college campus. Scream 2 took place on a college campus. But unfortunately for Radish, this is his only film, and his character is killed off. He almost made it to the end, but here's a look at that scene.
Courtney! It's me, Radish! Let me in! Courtney!
So unfortunately, Radish didn't make it to the end of the film. And I go back to what I said earlier. He appears to be an inspiration for the Randy Meeks character in Scream. And back at that time, in these slasher movies from the 80s, you didn't have a lot of characters that were in on what was happening, that were sort of warning people, except for Crazy Ralph from Friday the 13th. I mean, he was always telling people that something was going to happen. Remember in part 1 and 2, love those movies. But I do find it interesting that Scream probably drew some inspiration from this little film from the early 80s. Wasn't a big hit, but it definitely made an impression on, you know, filmmakers and people who are looking at horror, modern horror now, and taking a look back at what was happening then in the early 80s. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Follow me on my social media channels here on YouTube, Marino Show. I also have an Instagram, The Marino Show, TikTok, The Marino Show, and Facebook, The Marino Show. And my actual show where I interview different actors, creators, musicians, etc., airs on Austin Music TV, channel 16, every Saturday at 10 a.m. Thanks for watching.